All right, so I've started the recording. So this is going to be a quick start webinar, and we've only done one of these before, and that time I forgot to record, so I just hit record. So like I said a couple of minutes ago, what I want to do is I just want to give sort of an overview of how the front end of the website works, including some testing and stuff like that. I'm going to give some hints and tricks, some information about where you can get code, do some geeky stuff like showing you an example of using Grunt plugin and using a Selenium example, and then talk about a little bit about the roadmap, where we're going, and then some questions. So we've got an hour slated, and I'm not sure how much of that we're going to use because, like I said, there's only a couple of you on here, much less than the last time, and which is good because we'll have a lot more time for questions and stuff like that. So this is Tenon. Of course, you all know this, otherwise you wouldn't be here. Most of you, like I said, are already customers anyway. Some of you are also users of plans that include multiple people, and we are still working on some of the business about adding teams and organizations and all that stuff. So for you, if you're on a plan that allows for multiple users, feel free to share your API key. It all goes under the same bucket billing wise anyway, and that's how it's going to remain when we move to the teams and stuff like that. So don't worry about any of that stuff in terms of licensing or any of that sort of thing. We're really not going to come down on everybody. As a matter of fact, what we prefer is more usage, because the more you use it, the more you become familiar with it and can give us feedback on how we can make it better for you. So I'm going to go through the entire process of registering and setting stuff up. So I'm going to go ahead and go through the register process. You guys have already done this. Most of you have already done this anyway. Let me log out of LastPass. So I just fill in my username and password, and I'm going to get this screen here, and I should get an email in a moment or two. So that's all that there is to it. For any of you who are on an Elite SaaS plan, what you'll want to do is let me know who those people are who may have registered under your account, and I'll add them to your Elite SaaS plan. So that's going to send out an email that I have to click to confirm. Waiting for my email to arrive. The documentation for the product itself, for the API rather, is all located here under Docs. Right now we need to update the documentation to include how to use the front end of the website, and use all the features of this. This is all primarily the API documentation. So we're going to talk about that a little bit later. So I got my confirmation email, and I'm just going to copy paste that URL in here, and this thing expanded on me. Copy paste the URL here. This is going to confirm me, and that's really all I need to do. So now I can go in and log in. So I'm going to log in. And this is going to be what we'll see, what a brand new user sees. You guys have probably all been here and done this and seen what's here. This is the test history. Obviously, I haven't done any tests, so there's none of that. As a free user, I get a default project, and I get and that's it. And that's all my projects are going to go into. Let's talk a little bit more about some of these things. My profile is going to include my name, my gravatar if I have one, and stuff like that. So I can change my name or my email address here. This will be under notifications. You'll see all the previous emails that we've ever sent to you. We allow everybody to unsubscribe from emails, but what'll happen is basically the notifications will continue to populate with your emails that we would have sent you if you hadn't unsubscribed. You can change your password here. You can change your address here, and then these two are sort of the important part. Your API key, obviously, you're going to need this in order to do anything outside of the website. and then API settings. So if you're a free user, you may have seen this, API settings, because you can't upgrade your API settings without paying. So I'm going to log out. I'm actually going to stop sharing my screen for a moment so I can upgrade my new user. All right, so I'm going to share my screen again. And now I'm going to go and log in as my user under my upgraded account and log in. So now that I'm no longer a free user, I can do a couple of things. I can change my API settings. I'll talk about these in a little bit more detail in a second, but there are some other things that I can do now in terms of creating new projects. I can add a new project instead of my default project. So let's talk really quickly about your default project. Basically, anytime you don't specifically select a project, say as part of your API requests or some other way, all your testing is going to go into this default project, which is pretty cool because it's still a good bucket for you to put stuff in. So let's go back to the API settings. If you may have noticed, if you've ever gone into the documentation, you'll notice that there are a whole host of API request parameters that are going to adjust the way that Tenon does its testing. And so they're all listed here: app ID, certainty, all these sorts of things, and you can read up on them in detail there. But let's go through. I'll go through this because I think it's a little bit easier to sort of talk about on the way through. Certainty is an interesting one, and we added certainty as a way for us to provide an indication to the user of how certain the product is that it's actually found a problem. One of the things you may know about accessibility testing tools is that there's really only a small number of things, percentage-wise, that can be tested for automatically. About 25% of the accessibility best practices can be tested for definitively. And that 25% would be these things under 100% certainty. These would be the things that Tenon is, without a doubt, certain that it's found an issue. And then, of course, it goes lower from there. And there may be other things that we can test for that we're not going to be certain about. Things like very long alt attributes. Historically, just based on my about a decade as an accessibility consultant, what I've noticed is that often really, really long, say 200-letter alt attributes are typically not useful. So that might be something that we would say, we'd give it a 60% certainty or something like that, because it could be a really great alt attribute. We just don't know. But those are some of the things that we want to consider. So under default certainty, you could say, I only want the things that are 80% and above. Everything else, it's too risky. Let's say you were using the product as something that's part of a continuous build scenario or something like that, where you really wanted to be certain so that you were able to, really find the stuff. And then maybe you had your own accessibility subject matter experts who could do the rest. That's cool. You just set this here for whatever you're comfortable with. So I'm just going to set it at 0 because I trust the tool. Next up is priority, and priority is really interesting. I created a proprietary algorithm for determining what the priority is for something. You've probably noticed this in any of your issue tracking systems that are out there, say ALM or TFS or Jira or whatever. They're going to have some sort of priority and severity indication in the issue entry screen. So this is a proprietary algorithm that we developed at Tenon to say how important something is. And it takes into consideration user impact across 6 different disability populations, ease and speed of repair, impact on the interface, impact on presentation logic, that sort of thing. And out of that, you will get a priority score for each individual test that's on the scale of 0 to 100. In the issue results themselves, this will actually be calculated at real time and normalized against each other. So in other words, if you have all these issues that are, let's say you only had 10 issues, your most important issue is going to be going to be at 100 and so on and so forth. So again, this is a threshold for you to customize how you want to train, and it could be you could be okay with 0. You might want to go up higher than that. In practice, I wouldn't set this any higher than 80. The reason I say that is because there are going to be some things that give you 73% or I'd say 60. Sorry, there's going to be things that give you like a 73% priority. Lots of them are going to fall into that range that you may miss if you go too low or too high. So if you go too high up to 80, you're going to miss some of those. So use the tool, practice with it, see what you're comfortable with, and then set it accordingly. Again, I'm going to leave it at 0. Next is fragment, and admittedly, I think we need to come up with a better label or some sort of description about this. But basically, you can test both a URL with Tenon or a document source. So you can send HTML through the API, or you can go into the test now and enter HTML source here. And so if you're not testing an entire page, you can mark it as a fragment. And if you mark it as a fragment, then it's going to test it a little bit differently. So typically you're going to set this to no, unless you know, again, you're only going to send over fragments of pages. Say you're working on a widget library or something like that. Next up is importance, and importance is one that gets used as a multiplier for severity or for priority. So if you know, like, let's say this is going to be a project that consists only of template elements. Let's say you're a WordPress developer, a theme developer, or something like that, and you're testing widgets, or let's say you're testing new specific portions of the UI that are going to be core components of the UI. You might want to set this up to 3, but this is only relevant in the context of other pages as well. So this will be globally impactful. If you set this to 3 and all the others at 3, then it's not going to have any effect. But if you keep it at the default and then change it as needed, that's good to go. Default level, that obviously refers to WCAG level. We default this to AAA. This next one is whether you want reference information. I'm going to go over the returned results in a moment, but basically, do you want links in your results that include reference information? Yes or no? Then the next part is, do you want to store results? Storing results is interesting because if you store the results, then you can get at them later. If you never have any plans on doing that, let's say you're solely going to be using this as a continuous integration or unit testing product or something like that, then you may not need to do this. But otherwise, you would select yes if you want to keep it. Finally, the last two are going to be our default, or last 3, default user agent string, meaning how you want Tenon to identify itself. This is not terribly impactful unless your site does some sort of user agent sniffing. In other words, if you present a different site to people based upon what browser they're on, then that might make a difference. Or if you want to sort of whitelist the user agent string that you come up with for Tenon to access something, you could do that. Otherwise, just leave it alone. Finally, the default viewport height and viewport width. So one of the things that's really awesome about Tenon is that we can test your responsive designs. What will happen is the headless browser inside Tenon will render the page in the default sizes that you set here, and will render the page in that size, or as if it was that size, and do its testing that way. So what's really cool is if you know what your responsive breakpoints are, let's say they're width of 760 and I don't know 500 or something, then you can test it that way. It'll trigger your responsive breakpoints and do something. So default is 1024 by 768. We use that because lots of users with low vision will use lower resolution settings than the latest and greatest that you and I might have on our monitors. So we leave it at that. So you submit your settings here, and now these settings are going to be persisted throughout all of your testing, unless you override it, which you totally can. So you can override this at the project level. You can override this at the individual test level. Finally, this is applications. So applications is you can register an application with Tenon that then people can use. So if I go here to get code, and we'll see here site validator, Mortis, access monitor. These are all applications that people have registered with the site. So if you want to, basically if you want to promote an application that you've created using Tenon, you could totally do that. So let me go back to projects real quick. And we'll notice here if I add a new project, I'll have all these settings available to me. These are the settings that we created here in the previous screen, persisted into this new project. And again, I can override them. So let's call this, the, let's see, federal government, multi-federal government websites. There's like 400 of them or something. No? More? All right, so we'll do FedGov. So we're going to test all these sites all at once. Oh my goodness, it's taking forever. All right. Now, so we want to give it a project ID. I use this convention for the projects I create. I'd use uppercase, and I separate the words with a underscore. Federal government websites. I give it a description. And now I can add or remove URLs for testing. Obviously, since this project is new, I wouldn't be removing any. But I'm going to paste this in. Now you notice here that there's a whole bunch of junk in here that's not URLs. It's got the senate.gov and then it's got that next to it. Don't worry about that. It's only gonna rip out the URLs and add those to the test queue. So then I can select whether I want to test these URLs now. I'm going to hit yes. Now, do I want to monitor the URLs? This is a really awesome feature. Because what this will do is when it'll add these to a monitor, and on a periodic basis, the monitor goes out, grabs URLs, and see if they've changed. And if they have changed, it'll retest them. So if for instance, that certain portions of the website are getting modified on a regular basis, you can just go ahead and say monitor, and we'll test those changes. The other cool thing here is if you have, let's say you had a sitemap.xml file, this would totally completely ignore the XML formatting, but rip the URLs out of it, and so you could test directly like that. Finally, all of our API settings as before, and do I want to set this as my default project? I hit no, I hit submit, and there we go. So now we see here it says queued tests, 482. And then in a moment, we'll see this start to change. We'll see that the queued test is gonna reduce. It'll tell us how many successful tests there were, and so on. There we go. So we've already started testing them. All right. So what else can Tenon do? We're about at the halfway point. The information here is all up to date and gives us information on the product and its responses. Let me give you a demo of the test now functionality. Now, here's a super secret feature that you may not be aware of, and that is that you can, if you are logged in, as you are now, and I go to, let's say I want to go to google.com. Have you guys all seen the Tenon-Check plugin? So we have Tenon-Check available in the Chrome Web Store, and there's also a version for Firefox. So here's the Firefox one. Here's the Chrome Web Store. We also have a version for We have a version for Opera, and we have a version in the IE gallery as an IE accelerator. Anyway, it'll give you this little icon here. So here's the ultra awesome quick tip that's top secret. Actually, not top secret, just not publicized well. I can hit this button, and it will test this URL for me. Now, what's really cool about this, though, is if you are logged in, then this test will go into your default project. So I see, here we go. See, there's a default project there, total test run 1. Now I see a lot of you guys that are in attendance. I see you guys using the demo a lot. So sign in before you use it, and this will go into your history. Okay, so let me explain a little bit about what we see here. First off, this is a share link. You can just share these results to somebody. So if you're like a QA person, you can share these results immediately with them by just copying that URL. This will tell us how many issues. This says total errors, total warnings, and then the processing time, the screen size, all that sort of stuff. And then we get the error. Now this is all the same information that you would get from the API. All we've done is make it pretty. Actually, all ASA has done is make it pretty, because I'm not a designer at all. So this is the violating code. This is the code that was found to have the violation in it. And then here is this little icon would show error or warning if there were any. But the errors are anything with 80% certainty and above, and the warnings are anything with 79 and below. And then it gives us the priority. So here's we see 83, 87, so on and so forth. Here's a 39%. So we could have gotten rid of that one. We give the line number, that is where it is in the code, and the column number, so what character starts the issue. The specific WCAG success criteria, the violation, and then this recommended fix will take us to information on the best practice that was violated. Now, some of these are in need of some attention. So, for instance, this one has blank remediation guidance that we need to fix. But each of these will have information on them on user impact, repair speed, so on and so forth. This would be the total non-normalized priority. So this is where I was telling you earlier about the priority being normalized across the test run. It says 33 here, but it says 83 there, meaning that that's normalized against all the other ones. It's got 83% priority. This is another thing to pay attention to, which is this called the test ID. The reason why I want you guys to pay attention to it is primarily because we care a lot about test accuracy. We care a ton. We're pretty much super neurotic about it. The reason why we're super neurotic is this nice UI that my partner Asa has created, and all these awesome features that we have in the background here are nothing if the tests themselves are not accurate and are not good. So if you find something that you disagree with, tell us about it. If you find something that's irrelevant, that's just plain wrong, give us this test ID, give us the test URL, tell us why you disagree, and we will completely listen. I'll give you a great example. These guys here, this test and this test are going away very soon, because we found that deprecated markup, although gross and just bad coding practice, has such a low impact on users, including users who use user-defined style sheets, that it's not really a big issue. And so we're going to completely demolish these tests themselves here in the next couple of weeks. And so these are going to be a different deal. So the blank link text, we're definitely going to be keeping, but we're going to be adding a new test that looks for the accessible name calculation, and we'll talk more about that if anybody's interested. But again, another thing that we're going to be improving on. Blank links are bad. We're always going to show this error, but at the same time, we're going to probably ratchet down the user severity a little bit and then look for the accessible name calculation as an additional test. So this is it for the UI demonstration portion of this. What I want to do is talk a little bit about API stuff, if I could. The reason why I want to do that is because our feeling is the absolute best use of the product is through the API, mostly because it allows you a flexibility that nobody else really has. The API allows you to do all sorts of stuff. So this is how we get to things like this integration into the site validator service. So site validator is really cool because it'll validate your HTML and CSS, and now includes Tenon. So when you do a site validation run, you can also include Tenon in that, and that's through the use of our API. Same thing goes for Joe Dolson's Access Monitor. Same thing goes for this Visual Studio extension, and plenty more things that are out there. And it's really simple. You need only you really only need two things. Your key, obviously. So you would get your API key by going here and copying this. So let me go ahead and copy that. And for those who don't know, this is a Chrome extension called Postman, and Postman allows you to test stuff like that. So that's why I'm using it. So here's my API key. Now I'm going to enter source. So there's two required fields. It's key and either URL or source. So in this case, I'm just entering source code into it. I have an empty heading, and I have an image with no alt. I've set fragment to be 1, and then I'm going to set ref to be 1. Anybody remember what ref is? I don't think I've covered it. It's whether I want reference material in there. And then I'm going to have store equals 1 because I want it to store the results. So I'm going to go here to send. And what's going to happen is that's going to go to the API. It's going to test this string of HTML, and it's going to give me my results. If we go over to the dashboard, we'll see now that this is in there, and I can click on View Results, and it gives me the actual results, and it's going to tell me that this image source is it has an image and it's missing an alt attribute, and then the blank heading there. So over here, this is the view of the. I wish there was a way I could expand this. This is a view of the API response, and this is all documented in the documentation. But you'll see a bunch of stuff here that I'll explain a little bit. This is the global stats. This gives us the density. Density is really interesting because it tells us basically it'll tell us the global density over all of the projects on the site. And I actually put a blog post under here on how to use that information to come up with your own grade. And so it uses that information and gives you a way that you can measure your own score against this information. It's pretty interesting. Let's see. Go through here. Obviously, it tells us whether we've gotten any success. This is going to reiterate our request to us. So it tells us what we've done to do the testing. It gives us when it happened and how long it took, and then it gives us our results. I'll explain all those in a moment. And then it gives us a summary of our own issues and whether what the number of issues were and all that sort of stuff. There's a couple other things to pay attention to. We provide this node as a service. It's called client script errors. So if there's any problems with your JavaScript that could have impacted testing, then we put that in here. So it could help you if you're like, you didn't get any results back and you were expecting it or something. Here's another one that's actually an upcoming feature that's going to come out soon. Is going to be wait for. What's cool about that is we're going to give you the ability to delay testing by a couple of seconds or something like that, which is really going to be helpful if you have a website that loads a whole bunch of JavaScript and other stuff. You can actually set it to wait a couple seconds, and it will wait for that amount of time. It'll also listen to a specific event. We'll talk about some of these things in another webinar, because I want to continue on with some of the other things that we can do. But here's all the results. And remember where I was talking about, I used this ref parameter here. This is what I mean. In your results, you're going to get reference information. So you could share this link, for instance, in an issue report, and the developer will be able to read up on what's going on. So with only a couple more minutes left before I want to do some Q&A with any of you guys, and also share the roadmap, I want to talk about doing an integration with say Selenium or something like that, because this is really cool if you're in an environment that does QA automation. Let me zoom in here. Okay, so let me change to the Selenium directory. Oops. All right, let me close this and this and this and this. All right, go back to that. So I'm going to give it my API key. And then what I'm going to type in, I'm not going to bother showing you the geeky code stuff right now, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to type in grunt WebDriver. What this is going to do is the first test here that this shows is just your basic assertion from a test. And next thing it's going to do, it's going to test the page as it is now. So it's going to say it should have no accessibility errors. Now, if you notice there at the bottom here, it says Google settings menu in the window. And then what it had done is it popped open that window and tested just that piece of text in that little menu it popped up. And of course, the assertion is it should have no accessibility errors, and it had some. So we failed the test. So you can use that as part of your testing. Let me go into the actual code itself. Here we go. So this is the spec itself. And so all it's doing, because what this does, it uses a node module created by a guy named Justin Stockton. And so this is just regular assertion library that it's using, but it also has these commands from the node module called analyze URL and analyze HTML. So in this case, it says browser.tenon-analyze URL, and it's going to say it should have 0 errors. It didn't, of course. And then it should have no accessibility errors. It clicks this menu item. It pauses for 1/10 of a second, and then it analyzes that and said it should have 0 errors. You can do all sorts of other cool stuff with this, with the node module. Okay, so the last thing I wanted to talk about was roadmap, and I apologize for the headache there. Let me talk about the roadmap really quickly for those of you who are who didn't like run away. So the roadmap is only available to paid users. And so that's fine, but here we go. So the roadmap is here, and the roadmap is going to list a bunch of stuff that we're trying to get done soon, and among them are some API improvements with respect to additional parameters. These screen position parameters, for instance, and the issue parameters for the screen position will help us do something else that's really cool, which is going to be screenshots of both the page and the individual issue. So that one's really cool. Next, by the way, I'm mentioning these in order that they're on the page, not in the order that they're going to be finished. is the spider. So the spider is going to be able to, as the name implies, of course, spider the entire an entire website of your choosing. Naturally, that's going to impact your usage levels. So if your usage level only calls for a certain amount of API calls, then you're going to want to be mindful of that because you can easily run up to your limit really fast. But it's pretty awesome. It is super mega fast and also really powerful. And there's going to be an API behind that too. So in other words, you don't have to touch the interface, the front end interface that we've been showing in order to use it. Next up is organization management. This is going to be like if you've ever used GitHub, for instance, how GitHub allows you to take part in any list of organizations, potential organizations. Really cool because you can contain, you can sort of contain your testing among teams, right? So one team can be working on project A, another team can be working on another thing. It's pretty awesome and robust. Charts is awesome. Charts is going to allow us to do lots of charts relating to um, performance of individual pages, projects, all that sort of thing. And this is really cool because it also plays into a project that we've been working on, which is a new dashboard. So right now the dashboard is also like a test history, but we've been working on something with Microsoft in terms of a dashboard that allows you to get pretty high-level detail summary information around how you're performing, and that information can be narrowed down to organizations, projects, or any of those sorts of things. Screen tests, new tests at the dashboard, and a couple of other plugins. Now we're completing a plugin right now on Drupal. And it's going to be a Drupal plugin that allows you to test a page that you're currently working on. So that's going to be really awesome. We're completing a plugin for Sublime Text 3 editor. And what else are we working on? Those are the things that are currently underway right now. Let's see, Selenium tests, a greater internationalization, containerization is another thing that we're working on. The containerization part of things is going to be really cool because you'll be able to, for enterprise customers, they'll be able to stand up an entire infrastructure in simply a matter of minutes. So that's it in a nutshell. Does anybody have any questions?